President Trump issuing a 48-hour ultimatum to Iran last night, threatening to obliterate its power plants if the Strait of Hormuz isn't reopened.
Chief Foreign Correspondent Trey Yingst is live on the ground in Israel with the very latest. Trey.
Yeah, hey guys, good morning. Right now we are in the city of Arad in southern Israel, where overnight an Iranian ballistic missile slammed into an apartment complex, wounding at least 100 people. I do want to just show you the scene behind me here. You can see damage to this building right here. These apartments totally gutted with rubble as crews are still on the scene, ensuring there are no unexploded ordinances and things like that. My cameraman Yaniv's going to pan over to this bus. You can see the shattered window of the bus, that windshield there, as this explosion took place, rocking the area. We have some video overnight showing the flames rising from these buildings as first responders arrived on the scene. Civilians were escorted out. This is an area packed with civilians. And it just gives you a sense of how dangerous these Iranian ballistic missiles are as they slam into central Israel. Reports that there was another cluster munition launched just about 30 minutes ago. We also know the Israelis are going after the storage facilities of these Iranian ballistic missiles. We have some new video from the IDF showing those strikes against Iran yesterday. All of this is taking place as the range for these missiles was shown directly by the Iranians over the weekend when they launched 2 ballistic missiles toward the Diego Garcia Air Base in the Indian Ocean. This is about 4,000 kilometers from Iranian territory, and the Israelis and the Americans say this is why the operation had to begin, because it gives you a sense of just how dangerous these long-range missiles are. Now, President Trump over the weekend issuing a new warning to the Iranian regime. He said on Truth Social, quote, "If Iran doesn't fully open without threat the Strait of Hormuz within 48 hours from this exact point in time, the United States of America will hit and obliterate their various power plants, starting with the biggest one first. Thank you for your attention to this matter." President Trump clearly, again, coordinating with the Israelis, who are continuing on an hourly basis their air campaign against the Islamic Republic of Iran. And at this site earlier today, guys, I interviewed Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. At the top of next hour, we will bring you his remarks. Guys?
And Trey, so just about where you are now, talking about the strike that's injured over 100, it's a reminder, it seems, that while we hear from the president and from Secretary Hegseth that they have greatly degraded Israel's missile capabilities, that this is a reminder they can still strike, and it is deadly.
Absolutely. Look, we are looking at a reduction in strikes from the early days of this war, but not Iran's inability to fire. The reality of this conflict is that Iran is still launching ballistic missiles and drones, not just at civilian residences in Israel, but also in Gulf countries. They're targeting energy infrastructure, and they have the ability to respond when and where they want to. And so entering into week 4 of this conflict, there is a very difficult situation ahead for the Israeli people, and Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says he will continue to strike the Islamic Republic along with the U.S. planes that are over the skies of Iran each hour.
Trey, you read the tweet, with a very powerful, strong tweet from the president saying you have 48 hours where we're going to go this and this and this. Have the Iranians responded to what they will do in response to that?
Yes, and so guys, just stay with me here. We are walking right now. We're walking right now. One second, guys. So just give me one moment here. You can see they're starting to move the press back here. There are a lot of officials that are actually coming to this location. And so we're just going to move as we talk to you. But in terms of the president's threats against the Strait of Hormuz and the Iranian regime and their presence in the Strait of Hormuz, the president wants to be very clear that he will not tolerate attacks on international shipping vessels. The Iranians are trying to shut down this critical waterway because they understand that it is an area where they can exert pressure on the Israelis and the Americans. And that is the reason that the president is warning them that he will strike heavy in this area if the decision is not made by the Iranians to open this strait. I do want to let you know also, I asked Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu if the Israelis will participate in possible strikes against the power grid in Iran. As the president noted in this True Social post, he says that the United States and Israel continue to coordinate as this war develops. Guys?
So, Trey, where at the site where you are right now, you know, we're so used to talking about the laser-guided missiles that the U.S. drops that are very targeted, that go through a bedroom window. Obviously, this was aimed at Israel and loosely aimed at a neighborhood. How specifically targeted was this missile that landed last night?
So the Iranians have the ability to enter in coordinates in these ballistic missiles, and target specific areas. This was not a cluster munition. This was a direct impact of an Iranian ballistic missile, and it caused a significant amount of damage to these homes in this area. At least 100 people injured in this one specific strike. What the Iranians are also doing is using cluster munitions against the civilian population here. And we understand in Tel Aviv right now, first responders are at up to 15 different scenes where a cluster munition rained down on the population below. And so the Israeli officials that we're talking to say this is going to last for a few more weeks. And so there's an understanding that the civilian population here has to brace for days and possibly weeks and even more months of this conflict ahead. Guys. We're seeing,
Trey, really quick, we're seeing the damage being done in Israel. Talk to me about the Gulf states. How vulnerable do they feel in this situation? Could Iran strike their desalination facilities, or do they feel they have enough protection on their own and with the United States and Israel to prevent anything really sort of damaging in terms of their ability to survive?
The short answer is no. There is not enough protection for these Gulf countries and the energy infrastructure there. And we saw last week the Iranians targeting the Ras Laffan facility. This is the largest liquefied natural gas facility in the entire world. And the Qataris came under direct fire, and it took out 17% of their exportability. And so as this war continues, there will be an ongoing threat to Gulf countries, and as Israel's prime minister spoke about today, the possibility that these countries get more directly involved in protecting the Strait of Hormuz, as the president is calling for, and also taking possibly offensive action against the Iranian regime.
All right. Trey Yingst, live for us in southern Israel. Trey, we'll check back in with you a little bit later. Thank you.
Thank you, Trey.
You know, let me walk over to the wall now, because one of the things we hear a lot about in these conflicts is an escalation ladder. And when Iran fired the intermediate range ballistic missiles at Diego Garcia that Trey mentioned, 4,000 kilometers from Iran, that was an escalation that not only stunned the U.S., but the entire world, because Iran had not publicly stated that they had anything that could go more than 2,000 kilometers. And yet here now we know they have two 4,000 kilometer range intermediate missiles that fortunately did not impact anything, but it's a warning. It's a message that they have these capabilities that they didn't publicly state. In fact, under President Obama's JCPOA, there was no restriction on Iran's missile capabilities. They said they weren't building it. Now we know. And what is the danger? Why is the world on notice? Because look, from Rome, Munich, Paris, London, Berlin, Oslo, all now within this radius, these capitals, and many of these capitals in these countries do not have the missile interceptor technology like we have and like Israel has. So should a nuclear-tipped intermediate-range ballistic missile be fired at one of these capitals, it could change the trajectory of humanity as we know it. The dangers are immense. And when we talk about escalation, Iran has escalated in a way that I think the whole world now, you've seen more than 20 countries buy in now on trying to get that Strait of Hormuz open. This is yet another component because of the capitals in the European countries that are possibly at risk now with a threat that Iran, before they fired those missiles, had previously not been known to have.
Yeah, it might actually inspire some of the European countries who've been a little reticent to get involved. Maybe they will see this threat as a reason to get involved. My question is about the Strait of Hormuz. The Strait of Hormuz, as you know, is important because all of this oil that comes through here, especially for China and other countries. And Europe. And Europe as well. That's right, Charlie. And Iran is able to make a lot of money off of controlling that entry point or exit point out of that area. So is that something that is the United States trying to control that? Is it possible to control it, or is it just trying to get a concession based on this tweet that we saw last night that they won't block it?
Well, I think one of the things that is obviously important for President Trump is the fact that, you know, because oil and gas, they're commodities, even though the United States is a net exporter of oil and gas, it doesn't really matter on a global market. If gas prices are going up, oil prices are going up because of a conflict like this all around the world, it's going to necessarily raise the prices of oil and
For
gas
everybody.
in the United States. So it's a global problem that and it's one that President Trump has warned about going back for decades, of course.
Yes.
But I think your point is exactly right. The fact that, and it shouldn't be because of the missile ranges. It should be because Europe recognizes that if they have, if their people depend on oil and gas, which they do, we all do, all around the world, then it's a responsibility to make sure that there's a free flow of the energy resources out of that region.
I guess I'm trying to understand if one of the objectives is for the United States to control the Strait of Hormuz, or is the objective just to get the Iranians, if it's even possible, to stop threatening people with opening and closing it, depending on.
I would just try and sum it up this way, and that is, the president isn't necessarily trying to control the strait. He's trying to reopen it. And the clock is ticking with the 48-hour tweet because, as Charlie points out, freedom of navigation, not only in the Strait of Hormuz and in other places in the world, are critical to global economies. And President Trump is saying Iran is exercising their threat to hold up and affect and impact negatively, economically, global economies. And he's saying, no, freedom of navigation must come first. We cannot do this. And he put the pressure on all these other countries that are now buying in to get behind him to force it to open.
And nobody has a bigger dog in this fight, of course, than Iran's neighbors, who up until now have been afraid to confront Iran directly and actually, put the bully in the neighborhood on notice. But because of what's gone on in the last 3 weeks, you suddenly have all of these neighbors around Iran openly confronting Iran, and they are the ones who should be primarily in charge of making sure that there's a free flow
And
of
I
oil
just
and
read
gas.
that Saudi Arabia is kicking out, Iranian diplomats. So things are heating up there for sure.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.